podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode, my guest is a now retired rider. He is Shane Parker, and we're linking up with him in Adelaide. Since retiring, his life has taken a couple of twists, which we will hear about very, very soon. But in his career, he was a South Australian champion, he rode for his country, and he also rode for a number of clubs in Great Britain, including Ipswich, Middlesbrough, Kings Lynn, Hull, Bellevue, Peterborough, Glasgow, Somerset, and rounding off his career at Sheffield. He's also known as being an entertainer on the track, but also he's done a lot of great work for Speedway in general off the track as well. Gives me great pleasure to welcome my next Human of Speedway, Shane Parker.
Thanks, great to be here.
It's great to have you here as well. Of course, last year you had a very serious health scare. How are you getting on now and what are you up to?
I'm in a bit of recuperation mode. I had a cardiac arrest last June, so I wasn't in pretty good shape 12 months ago. I'm probably pretty lucky to be here at present, so it's a bit of a joy to be talking to you, to be fair.
Well, of course, we're glad to hear you, and I'm sure many of your fans all across Speedway, but especially the ones in Britain, will be very pleased to hear you in such fine voice at the moment. Do you remember much about what happened, though? Because it was your own family who came to save your life, wasn't it?
Don't know why or how, what happened. I mean, I've had previous heart problems, and it just sort of early one evening I collapsed and went down. I don't even remember anything. It was my wife and daughter that saved me, give me CPR, and Ambos rocked up and they got the paddles on me and brought me back to life. So, yeah.
And has your outlook on life changed at all since all of that?
Oh, I think it has, yeah, quite a bit. You know, it's you think things through a little bit differently and sort of, yeah, it definitely makes you think about life a lot more in different ways.
And you'd retired and headed back to Australia. How was retirement going for you up until that point? And how were you involved in Speedway?
I've done a fair bit of coaching back here in Australia when I first come home. I got back in Adelaide in 2012. And I've been helping out a lot of the junior kids and some of the senior kids here since I've been back. Still continue to help the junior kids out, I really enjoy that, to see them progress from a sort of 50cc stage from a 125 up to a 500. It's great to watch their progression. Some of them are already up in the 500, some are still coming through, but it's good to watch more talent coming through.
And a bit of a long-term project as well, I guess, over the next 10 years. It'd be exciting to see where they can end up.
Yeah, 100%. It's there's a couple of kids that are just gone over, and there's also one going over soon once this virus stuff sorts itself out. So it's exciting times for me to watch what they can achieve and get up to over there.
Let's start with your career then, going back to the early days, because how did you first get involved with Speedway in Australia?
My father got me into cycle speedway when I was 3 years old. So I was middle-y had training wheels on my bike when I was 3. But cycle speedway from 3 years old to 7. And I got my first mini bike. I was at the age of 6 when I got my first mini bike, but you couldn't race until you were 7. So when I turned 7, that was the end of pedal power and it became motor power. I started junior motocross and I was involved with that for 3 years. And when I turned 10 years old, I ended up at Junior Speedway, Sidewinders Junior Speedway in Adelaide. So it's a bit of a famous junior speedway track in Australia. It's probably the first junior speedway track, I think. And it's probably sort of one of the best facility-wise in Australia too. And we've had, I think there's been about 31 riders from Sidewinders that have gone overseas to ride. So that's something to be proud of.
And what sort of names were you growing up with at those tracks around that kind of time?
Ryan Sullivan, Brett Waterfield, Nigel Sadler, Shane Bowes, Nathan Simpson, Scott Norman, Craig Hodson, Stephen Baker, Mark Fiora, quite a lot. Wow,
and some well-known names there as well. Did you find coming through the junior ranks you inspired each other and encouraged each other and pushed each other along the way as well?
100%. You inspire each other and push each other. I think Mildura probably takes the crown in Australia as far as speedway talent. Sort of Mildura is probably 4 hours from Adelaide, out in the bush a little bit, and you don't have a lot to do out there, so they tend to spend a lot of their times going around in circles at the speedway track. They practice twice a week, whereas here in Adelaide, they're lucky if they get one ride a month. So the guys in Mildura at the moment are just leaping ahead of the guys in Adelaide, which is unfortunate, but just the way it goes.
But it went well enough for you, and obviously so well that you thought about making a career of it. When did that moment come that really you thought you could make a go of Speedway as a profession?
I started racing 500s over here when I was 16. I'd started a apprenticeship as a motor mechanic, so I probably had the opportunity to go overseas and race when I was 18 years old, but I wanted to finish my schooling for my apprenticeship, and when I got that done, I headed overseas. I was 19, turned 20 my first year over in the UK in 1990.
And that's a huge leap to make at that age, to move to the other side of the world. I mean, I can't imagine at that age up in sticks and heading to the far side of the world. How was that experience for you, heading to a completely new culture, let alone country?
Yeah, it always been a long goal for me, riding bikes for that long and coming up. And, you know, you look at like Phil Crump and Billy Sanders as idols, and yeah, it's sort of what you sort of aim for. I set me goals, I guess, and I was lucky to achieve that at the age I did. Yeah, no, it was quite ironic when I went over to the UK. I was quite particular with my food. I was meat and potatoes. I never ate nothing else, no veggies. Well, I know potatoes, vegetables, but that was the only one I would eat. And the old UK changed me. I ended up eating everything now. So yeah, no, it was a great experience going over there. I was quite young, but you know, it's sort of sink or swim, and luckily I managed to swim.
You certainly did, and you swapped the bright lights of Adelaide for Ipswich as your first club in the UK.
Yeah, I'd done my first 5 years was with Ipswich. They were good years. I was John Louis was the team manager, and learnt quite a lot off of him, and had some great team riding with Chris Louis as well. We went through a bit of a spate with a lot of 5-1, so he's one rider I enjoyed team riding with. But yeah, I left Ipswich in 1994 was my last year there, and I went to Middlesbrough for a couple of years, and so went to a few other clubs in the end. I think I rode for about 9 clubs in the end. So yeah, it was a busy period. But in saying that, it was a long period. I was over there for 22 years, so my career was quite extended. I probably could have rode a little bit longer, but I think when I retired at the right time, and I had one of the best farewells I could have ever wished for.
It was a fantastic meeting that as well, wasn't it, at Sheffield? And I remember a huge crowd turning out for you, and it was a fantastic lineup as well.
It was actually a week before I left to come back to Australia, so that week was involved my farewell meeting, packing my house up and getting on a plane and going home. So it was one of the most stressful periods in my life. But we were at the track. We hadn't opened the gates for the farewell meeting, and my wife grabbed me and said, "Come and have a look at this," and took us up to the turnstiles, and there was lines of people out to the road. So that was it was a little bit overwhelming, really.
And the quality of the riders that turned out that day for you, I remember it well. It was pretty much like the first Grand Prix of the year.
Oh, I think there were 6 world champions in the meeting. So, I mean, I was pretty honoured to have all them guys there, you know. And we had, there was sort of all calibres of riders. There was world champions down to like the Sheffield riders, you know. I wanted to put on a show and entertain everybody. And I even lowered the prices to get in for that day too. I think it was only about £10 to get in.
But I think that, when I guess you don't really see it the way that fans do, but I think the way that you would look back at your career in England is that, or in Britain rather, because obviously you rode in Scotland too, that you've really been very consistent and you've been an entertainer.
Yeah, I probably haven't performed as well as I would have liked on individual terms. As far as team goes, I mean, I've been pretty proud some of the teams I've rode for and what I've achieved for them teams. I've always been a better team rider, I think, than an individual rider. You know, people go and watch Speedway and pay, and they need to be entertained. You go there to put on a show. So I used to go out of my way to wind the opposition crowd up and wind people up and get them involved in the meeting. Always used to say if I left a Speedway meeting and I didn't have a boo or didn't have a cheer, I wouldn't be happy. So, you know, people went away and said I was an idiot, but next time I'd be at that track, they'd probably come back to give me more grief. So either way, it doesn't matter whether they like you or hate you. You've got to keep them involved and keep them interested in the sport and put on a show for them.
In a previous episode of this podcast series, we spoke to Neil Machin, who you'll know well.
Yep, very well.
And his thinking really was, as important as anything else in a team, you need to have an entertainer.
I was the chairman of the Speedway Riders Association for 8 years, and me and Neil butted heads on a few occasions over a few things. We probably didn't see eye to eye, and they actually owned my contract. So my last year, I kind of didn't have a lot of choices but to ride for Sheffield, which in a way turned out good because I had a great year. I enjoyed it, and I think me and Neil, our friendship grew from that season anyway. So we've become good friends since. And yeah, he's right. You do need entertainer. Even when it comes down to promoters, you need entertainers. I mean, Buster Chapman's a prime example for you. He used to be a bit of entertainer when I was over there, and used to have Bob Dugard down at Eastbourne. So, you know, promoters also play their part in entertaining.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. My guest in this episode, joining us from Adelaide in Australia, is Shane Parker, a legend with so many clubs around the UK, particularly Glasgow, Ipswich, Kings Lynn, Sheffield, Somerset, Bellevue. There's just a few of them. But something that you did off the track that you just alluded to there was you were the chairman of the Speedway Riders Association. And at this point, the Speedway Riders Association had completely fallen by the wayside, and you brought it back to life and got things going again to help stand up for riders' rights. How did all that come about?
Yes, I think originally it was actually Tommy Nichols, Scotty Nichols' dad, that was trying to get it up and running. And he had a few problems and it didn't happen, and we had to get rider numbers. And I think Tommy had sort of had enough in the end. And I said to him, would you mind if I took it over? Which I did. And we had to actually go out and get 51% of the riders before the BSPA had recognised us as a rider association, which was fair enough. And I think we'd done that easy. We ended up with something like 70% of the riders or something. So, yeah, we reformed it. Myself and Gary Havelock helped out quite a lot with that. And there was also Lady V from Ipswich that's done the secretary job for us. So that was a big help. And it was great to be able to get the association back up and running. So important for riders to have a say in the sport. They've been sort of walked over quite a bit by the promoters over the years when clubs have fallen by the wayside and riders are owed money, and then there's rule changes come in about bikes, and we never really had a say. So it's so important to have a say in the sport that we're involved in.
And you mentioned that you butted heads with Neil Machin. I imagine you butted heads with a few promoters during that time.
I did butt my heads with a few promoters, but there was some I got on with. You know, at the end of the day, it boils down to common sense and safety, I think. You know, you want a safe track to ride on. And there were times where we were put under pressure to ride by promoters and referees, and within reason. You know, if things are safe, if you can go out there and race, you can go out there and race. But if you can only go out there and ride, you're not putting a show on and you're not entertaining people. So, I mean, it was more safety and rules and things, I think, that I butted heads with promoters. But at the end of the day, everybody's got their say. You know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and I voiced mine as part of a riders association. It's not something that I'd done off my own back. I always asked the riders on their opinions, and what the majority wanted is what we went for with the BSPA. And we had a few successes with them. But in saying that, we banged our head against the brick wall quite a lot also.
And what would be your biggest wins in that time then, and the biggest changes that you kind of feel that you made to the sport?
Oh, I don't know if we made any changes. It was just a case of being there to stick up for riders when they had problems with not being paid or insurance issues or anything like that. And we actually got quite a few sponsors to give riders discounts, riders that were involved with the association. Teng Tools and Colin North, who sadly passed away, as put so much into the Riders Association. Riders were getting like 60, 55% discount on tank tools. So we had other companies as well that was providing discounts. So it was a good thing for riders, and it's just a shame that promoters probably didn't listen to us a little bit more. I think at the end of the day, we have some good ideas about the sport as well, not just them.
And when you look at British Speedway from such a distance as Australia, I'm taking sort of a more world view of it, and you're more isolated from things, what was the reputation of British Speedway at that time?
When I was young and up and coming and looked up to all the Speedway riders doing my junior stuff, it was the UK without a doubt. All the top riders were there, and that's where all the action was. Obviously, since the sort of probably 2000, start of the millennium, it's Poland's taken over. I think sadly, British Speedway's deteriorated in the calibre of riders, and probably the number of tracks that are closed too has contributed to that. So it's I think that probably below Sweden, I would imagine at present, which is sad to say. In saying that, I'm only saying what I'm hearing at the moment, because obviously I haven't been in the UK for 7 or 8 years now. So but it's sad in a way. I know the crowds have been down, but got to go out and entertain them people and draw them back in somehow.
It's a question I've asked a few times, and I get different answers every time, really, from different people. But how has Speedway declined over the last 20 years, do you think?
One of the things that I spoke to the BSPA about and pushed was when they were sponsored by Sky Sports, they had millions of pounds of money invested into the Speedway, and all that happened was riders got paid more money, and riders expected more money, and every rider expected more money, and all that Sky money got dwindled away on paying riders, which was 100% wrong. If they'd taken 10% of that money and invested it, they could have bought Coventry Stadium as a national speedway, or any other. There's loads of venues they could have bought, and they could have invested in junior development to bring on the kids over there. You need a good junior scheme in the UK, which doesn't exist. I mean, there's a few tracks that have got the junior bikes, but it should be absolutely booming over there, the junior side of the sport, and it's not, it's sad for British Speedway, really.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and my guest in this episode is Australian Speedway rider Shane Parker, who retired almost 10 years ago now, but over his career rode for 9 different clubs in the UK, starting out at Ipswich, finishing up at Sheffield. But the team that you spent the longest time with was the Glasgow Tigers. Must have been a bit of a culture shock, first of all, not moving from Australia to Ipswich, but then moving from Ipswich to Glasgow. Must have scaled things up a little bit. How was it there, moving up north of the border?
Yeah, correct. It's true. I actually said no initially to Glasgow, and yeah, it was the club I rode for the longest. I spent 6 years there. It was the one after that was Ipswich with 5. But no, when Glasgow originally offered me a contract, I kind of said there's no way in the world I'm going to Glasgow, because it was so far from being based in the Midlands. And I kind of sort of had to think about it, and it sunk in, and they sort of provided a couple of sponsors to go along with having to travel up there in regards to accommodation and being able to stay up there. So it wasn't too much driving up and back in one day, and as well as a meeting. So yeah, I went up to Glasgow, and it's probably a pretty rough place. I think every single night that I went out or had a meal or done something in Glasgow, I seen a fight or grief or police or something was going on. So it was entertaining up there. There was always something going on, and I used to say to my wife that I kind of felt like I was at home in Glasgow. It was a bit like being back in Port Adelaide, but not saying that Port Adelaide's that rough, but yeah, it used to be back in the day, a little bit dodgy. And ironically, when I finished racing Speedway my last year that I was riding for Sheffield received an email from a guy in Adelaide claiming to be my biological father, having been adopted. And I knew no idea about my biological father, and this guy out of the blue sent an email to Sheffield, and Sheffield spoke to me about it, and I ended up getting an email and sending it to him, and it turned out that it actually was my biological father, which was bit of a shock and a bit of a coincidence. And ironically, he was born 2 miles from Glasgow track. So I don't know whether that was anything to do with feeling at home in Glasgow or not, but maybe, who knows?
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah, amazing story, isn't it? Yeah, I was adopted at a very young age. I think 6 weeks or something I was adopted. Apparently my mum's parents were Catholic, and she was only engaged and wasn't married, so she had to give me up for adoption, and the boyfriend had to get out of her life forever. So I ended up being adopted and grew up with my adoptive parents, and at the age of 10 years old, my adoptive mum found another fella and left. So me and my sister ended up growing up with my dad, and ironically, he ended up meeting a lady that had a nervous breakdown. She was a friend of a friend, and he helped her get over the nervous breakdown. And ironically, that was my biological mother, believe it or not. So I met my biological mother when I was 10 and my biological father when I was 42. So there's a book in that somewhere, I think.
There certainly is. I mean, how did you feel when that news sort of came through? Because not something you were expecting, as you were saying.
When I found out about my mum, I was 10 years old and I broke out in tears and didn't know what to think. Regarding my dad, it was kind of like deja vu. It's like, here we go again. I was a little bit dubious about if he was my biological dad or not, but I asked him I haven't had a DNA test, but I asked him a few questions, and he knew a lot more than I did. So he filled me in with a lot of things I didn't know, and I still visit him today and see him. So it's good. Unfortunately, my adopted father passed away 2 years after I got home, after I retired. So them 2 years were pretty gold, actually. So when I said I retired at the right time, it sort of also involved getting back here and spending the last couple of years with him.
Sure, yeah, precious family time. You're listening to Humans of Speedway. Shane Parker is my guest. Shane, you're known across Speedway in general as being an entertainer, both on and off the track. And when I was looking you up ahead of this interview, I found your YouTube page, and there was one particular video that caught my eye. It was called Naked Hot Laps.
Yeah.
One of your party pieces.
Yeah, being an entertainer, that was any testimonial or benefit meeting or any sort of individuals, special meetings, I would always ask if they wanted naked hot laps, and if they wanted them, well, I would oblige. So I remember years ago seeing a picture of Brego doing it with a sticker stuck on one of his butt cheeks. And back in the day, you probably could get away with being totally naked, just boots and a helmet. But I always used to run me box, so I was covered up and decent for the kids.
Safety first.
Yes, I remember going to Boise's testimonial actually and going around Poole Speedway, and I think I was only like 2 or 3 seconds off the track record or something. It might have not have been that close, but it weren't far off the track record. And Boise's come up to me and goes, "You're a bloody idiot, mate. What if you come off?" And I kind of sort of took that on board, but it didn't stop me.
That would be quite incredible to break the track record naked. Would it stand?
Oh, I don't know. I think it'd be pretty limp at the time, to be honest.
Yeah. That needs rephrasing.
Yes.
But the entertainment value is something I see that you were obviously pretty handy with a hose pipe, with centre green announcers and promoters and so on as well.
It's just putting on a show, like I said, banter, and I always had a lot of banter with Kevin Long, who was the announcer at Ipswich for quite a while. Apparently, I came in from a race one day, and my mechanic turned around and said to me, he goes, "Jesus, that commentator just ripped into you and give you heaps." And I said, "Did he?" And so I thought, all right, no worries. So I thought I'd grab a bucket of water and stroll out to the infield and tip the bucket of water over him, which I did. I drenched him, and he was standing there with a microphone in his hand. Anyway, I ended up getting pulled into the Ipswich office at the end of the meeting. This was after I'd rode for him, mind you. And one of the promoters at Ipswich, Mike Weston, was trying to get me banned. He wanted to get me banned because I could have electrocuted Kevin Long with a microphone in his hand. And I turned around and said to Mike, I said, what, with a 9-volt battery in it, mate? I said, you got to be kidding. I guess that was his approach at the time, and I had a bit of a laugh about it and still do, actually. It was quite funny. But no, it's a bit of banter here and there. I actually remember winding a guy up at Newport Speedway. He was hanging over the fence and giving me a sign that I probably can't say. So I went up to him and I started giving him a bit of lip back, and he bent down, and as he's come back up, he's got a big rock in his hand. So I thought, I'm out of here, and I dropped my clutch and took off, and I don't know whether he threw the rock at me, but it was pretty big and in his hand, ready to go.
At least you had the helmet on, or did you not have the helmet on?
No, I had the helmet on, and it was probably a good thing. I try not to wind fans up too much. Probably the worst I wound somebody up, I might have probably gone a little bit too far with that one.
When you look at the over your career and you look back at the stories and things that have happened over the time, what are the stories that sort of make you smile the most, like those?
Oh, geez, that's difficult. I mean, probably the funniest one was another one that involved Ipswich. Actually, I was riding for Kings Lynn, and Buster Chapman was the team manager and obviously the owner of Kings Lynn, and we'd gone back to Ipswich, and obviously having ridden for 5 years, you know what they get up to. And I was watching the tractor go round, and every time Ipswich went off 1 and 3, the grader rode over 1 and 3, and every time it went off 2 and 4, they'd roll 2 and 4, pack it down. So I've clocked onto this pretty quick, and trying to sort of tell the referee that what they were doing was wrong, and it sort of didn't succeed. So a race had finished. I moseyed out in the middle and jumped into the tractor and tried to grade the track myself. And, Bob, the grader the grader driver at the times, grabbed me by the collar and me leathers and tried to drag me out the tractor. And there's a bit of a scuffle went on. And long story short, I ended up getting out. I couldn't get it in gear. I didn't realise there was 2 levers you had to use. So I went nowhere in the end. And got out the grader, and by this time Buster's come running over and he's trying to stick up for me, and there was a whole heap of people around, and I've just sort of headed off back into the pits, and I've turned around and I've seen a round circle of people, and Buster in the middle, and arms flying left, right and centre, and I left Buster to it.
Just wash your hands and run off.
Yeah, I did. But I've actually got a clip out of the newspaper from that. It made the newspaper in Ipswich, so always gave them something that was good for the local rag.
And is that something that Speedway's maybe missing more now? The traditional pantomime villain or the other character that sort of polarises the crowd but still draws them in every week?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if there's any characters left in the sport now or not. I think it's gotten to the stage now where it's that professional and there's so much money involved. You can't sort of clown around or be a bit of a goose. You've got to put your head down because there's so much riding on it. So it's I think times have probably changed a little bit regarding that with riders. I used to try and make it a habit that after every meeting you at least have to have 1 drink in the bar before you went home. And nowadays you go home, you go to sleep, you go to the gym. It's so much more professional than it was when I was riding.
And while we're saying we're maybe missing these characters, is it just progress and for the better of the sport that it is being taken much more seriously and much more professional now by the riders?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's better for the sport. It's got to progress with time and move with the times. And, with TV involved and big dollars and sponsorship, it's got to take that step forward or it's never going to go anywhere. And, I think that's something that British Speedway's probably struggled with a little bit, over the past sort of 20 years. It hasn't moved forward with the times and needs to, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but it has been good. It could be good, and it should be good. It could be better, and I hope it does pick up in the future.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan, and I'm pleased to say joining me in this episode is Shane Parker, direct from Adelaide, Australia. He's going to be picking his all-time 1 to 7 very soon and deciding on his perfect dream meeting. But we're talking about your colourful career on and off the track in terms of being an entertainer, but it's not been without its controversies. You were banned at the start of your career, and this was back in Australia. Can you tell us more about what happened at that time and how it all panned out? Because you were looking down the barrel of a 2-year ban at one point.
I'd done a meeting in Newcastle, which is 17 hours drive from Adelaide. And we got to the meeting. I actually rode in the meeting with Craig Hodson, another guy from Adelaide. He rode overseas for Peterborough and Bradford. And we got there and they started doing machine examination. We were all warming our bikes up, getting ready for the race. And the machine examiner's asking everybody for their licenses. And all the New South Wales boys were turning around and they were saying to the guy, it's in the post, it's in the post. And what the problem was for me, it was New Year's Day. So it was like the 1st of January and I'd forgotten to renew my license. Obviously the day before it would have been not expired, but New Year's Day it had expired. So I said it's in the post like all the other riders did, but it wasn't in the post and I hadn't applied for my license. So I actually got banned for a few months for racing in a meeting without a license. But having travelled 17 hours, the last thing I wanted to do was sit in the pits and not ride. So I guess I suffered the consequences for it.
But the ban was reduced, wasn't it? Because I think that they were threatening it to be a lot worse than that, potentially.
Yeah, I got off it pretty lucky in the end, I think. So, there was one other time I got suspended in the UK. I think the referee's name was Will Hunter or Will Hunt, and they were checking engines. It was when I rode for Middlesbrough, and they'd done an engine check, and I was going off my dial at him. What are you checking my engine for? You should be checking the people that are cheating. And he's pulled my engine down. And he turned around. And he goes to me, "We've got a problem with your motor, mate." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "It's 517 cc's." And I was completely oblivious to it because I didn't build me motors or nothing. And I don't know how it happened. Obviously, a tuner that I used had stuck something together that was over 500 cc's. And I got fined and banned for that. So it cost Middlesbrough a meeting and cost me a bit of money. But yeah, I'm not real fond of that, and I will hold my hand up and say I didn't know it was a 500, whether people believe me or not. That's how it goes. I had no idea.
I suppose if you are putting your trust in somebody else to look after your engines, then that must be a little bit of a risk in some respects, because your name's above the door, even if somebody else is doing the work.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. I mean, like I say, I mentioned earlier, like if you're a young kid up and coming, you need to know your bike and need to know what it does. And obviously that sort of thing, engine size, sometimes if you don't know enough and not involved, you're not going to have a clue if it's oversized. So yeah, it was one of them things. It's probably the only black mark against my career apart from the meeting without a license. So yeah, it's them two things. But it's pretty hard to go through a career without any marks against you. I think if you do, you're a great ambassador for your sport. That's all I can say.
Very delicately put. But on the other hand, when you look back over your career, what were the meetings that kind of stand out most in your mind that you think, yeah, that was pretty cool?
That's a bit difficult. Sort of on an individual front, I didn't achieve a great deal. I mean, the one that rings memories to me was I'd broken my scaphoid racing, and I'd been in plaster for 6 weeks, I think. And I got the plaster cut off, and I had 6 meetings in 6 days, straight out of plaster. So I remember riding 6 meetings in 6 days, and the 6th meeting was the Scottish Open at Glasgow. Scottish Open's normally always at Edinburgh, but that was when Edinburgh wasn't running, so they held the Scottish Open at Sheffield, the old Glasgow track. And so I'd done 5 days of racing and hadn't washed me bike for any of them meetings. I rocked up at Glasgow, 6th day on the trot, hadn't done me clutch, nothing. Jumped on me bike, had 6 rides, 6 wins, and won the Scottish Open. So that probably takes the cake for me, that meeting. The bike got a wash after that one. It deserved it.
Yeah, you probably collected a fair bit of shale on it by that point.
Yeah, it had, but most of it had fallen off. It had dried and fallen off. But no, I didn't do that too often. I think it was sort of a bit of a hectic period and a lot of travelling with 6 days of racing. And yeah, so it was what it was, and that's probably pretty memorable to me. It was a bit of an honour to win the Scottish Open.
Yeah, definitely. Big meeting there, a lot of focus, and especially winning it on Glasgow's patch would be
Yeah, it's sort of even more so after finding out about me biological dad being from Glasgow. So yeah, that's cool.
And when it comes to, like, we mentioned there about not washing your bike. This is a side that probably often overlooked by fans, I suppose. But there's a lot of preparation and washing bikes, washing your race suit, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, is that the kind of thing that that you do have a few hacks to speed that up when required?
Yeah, your majority of races are won in the workshop, and the time you spend on your bike and maintaining it and making sure it's not going to break down when you're out on the track. And I think you race a speedway bike for 4, maybe 5 minutes a night if you're lucky, and it takes you 5 hours to wash a bike. So there's definitely 80% of the time, probably more than 80% of the time spent in the workshop. Probably maybe only 5% of the time on the bike, I think. So yeah, it's really important to maintain your bike and look after it, and actually know what your bike does, engine wise, and whether your bike's spinning up or gripping, and you can convey that to your tuner. And it's a lot of knowledge, I guess, and it's hard when you're young and learning all that, and it takes a lot of years to get all that experience, I guess. So it probably helps to have former riders in your corner, which you've seen many times before. And it's just progression, I think, as you grow up and evolve with the sport.
And we do have a few young speedway riders who subscribe to this podcast. And what would be your advice to people at that stage who are just maybe starting out in the 500 level and so on, that would help them out?
Social media plays a huge part in things now. You definitely got to have a good social media profile, I think, on not just one social media either. There's plenty of them out there nowadays, and that can give your sponsors great exposure. So that's definitely one of the first steps I would take. Possibly also being able to work with media, being able to talk and being able to be interviewed by somebody that speaks to you. Obviously, being fit and working out in the gym and training's a huge part of racing. Probably more so pre-season than during the racing season, because you just don't have a lot of time during the racing season. So as long as you're fit at the start of the season, your racing will carry you through the rest of the season. So they're probably the 3 main things I would say to any young rider.
Yeah, all sound advice. And obviously media, social media, not something we would have been talking about at the start of your career. That's something that sort of developed
100%,
around you, isn't it?
Which was a great thing, because nobody knew about half the stuff we got up to back then. It was great. But you got to be very careful with a rider now. I mean, when I do my coaching with the young guys over here, I say to them, if you're going to have social media, you have your own social media, and then you have a race page. And you don't want your mates going on your race page with foul language or saying wrong things, because that could upset sponsors. So it's not just you; it's also your mates as well. It's sort of looking at the big picture, and social media can help you in the right ways if you're careful with it, but it can also help you in the wrong ways. It's got a few people in trouble too.
Yeah, I mean, I come from like a more of a broadcasting background, I suppose, but the motto really with social media there is never say anything on your own page you would never say on the radio or on the TV.
100%. Yeah, good words there.
You're listening to Humans of Speedway. I'm Ian Brannan. My guest in this episode is Australian speedway rider, now retired, but Shane Parker is with us, and we've reached that point in the podcast where we put together Shane's Speedway Paradise, the ultimate meeting and the ultimate location with the ultimate people. Who's he going to choose in his all-time 1 to 7? All these things to run through in the next few minutes. But we'll start off, Shane, with your perfect track. Now, this is irrespective of the surrounding elements. We're dealing with just the shale at this one. So what would you be riding on?
Well, I'm a bit undecided. I have 2 here, Kings Lynn and Birmingham. Now,
okay.
But Buster Chapman was doing the track at Kings Lynn. Huggy originally at Kings Lynn, and he used to prepare it so grippy and so drivey. I absolutely loved it. And Birmingham, Alan Bridget was doing the track there. It was when it first reopened again, and it was very similar dirt and very tacky and grippy again. So they're probably my 2 favourite tracks. I was never ever fond of any slick tracks. hated slick ones and loved the grippy ones.
Like going fast.
Yeah, well, it was a case of being a bad gator. I could never make starts real good, and at least when I missed the start on a grippy track, I had the opportunity to pass riders, and I was a racer. I was never a gator.
I suppose you've got to be at least one or the other, haven't you?
Yeah, well, true. I think a lot of the Danes are very good on the slick tracks. I don't know why it is, possibly because they grow up on slick tracks and that's how they learn to ride. So back here in Australia when I was growing up, we used to race on car tracks with concrete fences and they were always grippy. So I guess it's just what I grew up with.
That sounds really romantic. A kart track with a concrete fence.
Yeah,
fully compliant with health and safety.
Yeah, there was no such thing as health and safety growing up over here in Speedway. It was unfortunately we don't race on them tracks now, but fortunately we don't either. It's sort of catch-22 there because there's not many tracks we can ride on over here now that are sole bike tracks, and it's a lack of opportunity. But on the other hand, it was pretty dangerous, and you didn't want to make any mistakes with them concrete fences, that's for sure. But all the Aussies grew up doing that. It's what we knew. I mean, riders probably rode within themselves, I think, back then, whereas nowadays with an air fence, you can see that riders just put so much on the line, and I guess they kind of know there's a safety fence there, but geez, it's they put so much more on the line now with the air fences than they used to before them air fences. Air
fences, obviously, I know that Chris Holder had a really bad crash, didn't he, when he slipped underneath one, but have they really then, as you're saying there, softened up or increased the risks, as opposed to all riders taking extra risks knowing that there is that safety net?
I think the riders take extra risk knowing there's a safety net there. I think some of the air fences are good, and then there's some cheaper ones that aren't as good. I think they can be, the air fences aren't the be-all and end-all. I think they can be improved on, and I don't think they've been improved on for quite a few years. It would be good to see a bit more improvement on them. I don't know if riders are still having the problem with bikes hitting the fences and lifting up air fences and riders going under them, but back when I was racing, that was a big problem. Claimed a couple of really good riders some nasty injuries. So I mean, it's an added bonus, but you can build on that, and you can't just sort of say, well, we've got air fences now and that's enough. They can make them better and improve.
And moving on then to the stadium that you'd put your ideal track, which is a merge together of Kings Lynn and Birmingham.
It's a no-brainer. So, it's got to be Wembley.
Yes, the old Wembley.
Yep, 100%. Twin Towers.
1981.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get on to your all-time team then. I think this is the bit that everybody looks forward to the most. Who would be in your all-time 1 to 7? Over to you.
I've got Bruce Penhall.
It is 1981 at Wembley.
Sorry, he won it. He did, yes. And he was one of the older professionals, I think. I sort of always looked up to Bruce and admired him. The two Morans as one rider, Sean and Kelly put into one rider. Imagine that.
Wow, so you're sort of turning into a Speedway Frankenstein.
Yes. I mean, both of them were a talent. So I think if you could combine both the Morans, that would be a phenomenal rider. The next two I've picked are down to my experience with team riding with them and being great team riders. Firstly, that's Chris Louis, who I mentioned earlier. And secondly, my Glasgow days is we went through a load of 5-1s with me and James Greaves. So Greaves is one of them. And the next one's a really good mate of mine and a superb grass track long tracker is Joe Screen. Mr. Entertainer, if anybody is he's definitely one of them.
He likes a wheelie.
Yeah, loves a wheelie, and there's not too many people you can see go around the whole lap on the back wheels. So that's something I've never been able to do. And I love me wheelies. So no, Screeny will be there with us. And one other rider who's unfortunately got injured in the sport in 1990, and that's Eric Gunderson. Some guy that unfortunately didn't fulfil his full potential. So I'd love to see him there. And the final, last but not least, is a superb Australian back in the day, is Jack Young. There's my pick.
some interesting picks there because, it's not like going for the obvious world champions and so on, like James Greaves. And
No, good team riders. And, people I remember as back in the day. Yeah, that's my favourite 7.
So when I was growing up, I was a Bradford fan, a Halifax fan, and obviously that's where Eric got injured. And I wasn't at that meeting, but I do remember seeing Eric ride round that track, and he was just unbeatable. Him and Hans Nielsen were always you knew when they arrived with their respective teams that it was going to be a tough night.
Yeah, and Bradford was such a great track to watch him ride at too, I think it was might have been 89 Eric crashed, not 90. The world final was there in 90 in Bradford, weren't it? So
that's right. That was Per Jonsson won that.
Yes, yeah, correct. And Todd Wiltshire was third, sorry. But yeah, well, that was my first year in the UK, and my first world final I'd ever seen. And gee, what a world final it was! Memories there, definitely. It was Todd Wiltshire's first world final too, and to finish third was a super effort. That's another rider I look up to a lot. Reason being I look up to Todd Wiltshire is he was the immaculate starter. If anybody could gate, it was Todd.
And there's talk of Bradford coming back, by the way, as well. That's
I seen a couple of photos of Bradford a while back, and it looked like the track, they built a big club rooms or something over the third and fourth corner, and I thought, there's no hope of Bradford returning, but that's good news if it is. Let's hope so.
Yeah, they reckon they can still ride.
Yeah, cool.
The rugby, but it's disused at the minute.
I think I think the Ham's the Ham brothers done a great lot for Bradford. They put on a good show there, and they always had good riders in the Bradford team. Bradford team was always very hard. When you went there, it was pretty daunting. Yeah.
Yeah, a big stadium as well, isn't it?
Oh yes, yeah, it was. It was a great stadium to race in, and it's with the banking on the corners as well. It was. Always love a track with a bit of banking. You get a flat track, it's not as exciting, and the racing's not as good, but track with a bit of banking, you can have a go, and there's passing, and makes for good racing.
Okay, then. So moving on with your fantasy meeting, then we've got the riders sorted. Who's going to be the referee? Do you think?
This is not going to be the referee, and that's Frank Ebden. Okay, reason being was he was very quick on the 2-minute button. Bikes would still be on the track, and the 2 minutes would be on. So coming in from the race would be finished, they still wouldn't be off the track. Bang, the 2 minutes would be on. And I remember Frank getting a meeting finished in just over an hour one night. So it was all a bit hustle and bustle with Frank. But hard to say. Modern of my era when I was riding, probably the fairest referee, Tony Still or Jim Lawrence, possibly, I think. Paul Ackroyd. Paul Ackroyd was always reasonable. So probably out of them three, I think, mate.
Yeah, Tony Steele has had a few mentions.
Yeah, I imagine he would. He's very approachable, and you can talk to him, and he explains himself. And at the end of the day, riders, they get excluded or get put out of a race. It can cost them a lot of money, and they've got a lot of frustration to vent, and Tony always approached that really well, and he was always calm and collected about it, and told his side of the story to the rider. And more than not, the riders would understand where he was coming from and agree with him. So that's probably why a lot of people pick Tony, I think.
Is that the thing when you see riders getting on the phone to the referee after they've been excluded? Is that more for an explanation as to why? Because I've never seen a referee really overturn a decision.
No, and more than often you're completely wasting your time getting on the phone to a referee. But I think more than not, it is just that frustration and wanting to know why he done it to you. Only if you think you were in the wrong. If you're in the right, sorry. So it was to have it explained to you. I think it sort of calms you down a little bit. You can see it from his perspective. But I guess that's the side of it.
Do you wish that maybe TV and things like that will be used a little bit more now
100%,
to decide these things?
Without a doubt. I mean, if it's there and available, why not use it? Because, like I say, it can cost riders money. And if they're harshly, if they're sort of nipped at the gate and there's obvious proof that they've won the race, and video replays there, you've got to use it, I think. I mean, sometimes it might be a bit poor quality and not real good, but Yeah, no, definitely. I think like I said earlier, you got to move with the times, and I think video replays for referee would be a good step forward. One thing I've suggested over here in Australia, which hasn't been taken on board, is to have two referees at the meeting. You have one on the infield and one in the box. The one in the box is in control, but he's got another person or another referee to get a second opinion off, or the second referee might see something that the first one didn't. There's no way in the world a referee can watch four riders spread out over 4 laps all at one time. So referees are going to miss things from time to time. So I think 2 referees would help, and video replays would help.
And I suppose there's a big difference in each track as to where the referees sat as well.
Yeah, there's some tracks too where you can't actually see the tapes very well from the referee's box, and like riders touching the tapes, it could be a guess. And there's instances like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, referees are in the worst position possible. They can't do the right thing. They can't do the wrong thing. No matter what they do is right or wrong in somebody's eyes. So it's a tough job. I admire them for what they've done. Always tried to get along with them and be as friendly as I could to all of them for obvious reasons. But no, there was referees you liked, referees you didn't like. That's part of the sport, It's like riders. You get dished up by a rider. You put that rider in the black book, and referee excludes you, and it wasn't your fault. You remember that referee in the future, But at the end of the day, you wouldn't have the sport if it weren't for the referees. So it's you got to respect them at the end of the day.
On the subject of the laws of Speedway, then, if you were in charge of the rule book for just a day, what would you change?
No work visas for Australian Speedway riders. I mean, Sam Masters got put out for a year. He was stuck over here and couldn't get over there. There's been other riders in the past too, Work permits have created a lot of headaches for a lot of Australians over the years. I remember when I first went over, I was very lucky because my biological mother was born in the UK, so I had patriality. But I remember a rider from Queensland, Tony Rose. He hopped on a plane, flew all the way over to the UK and sat in the airport and didn't have a visa, and they put him back on the next plane and turned around and come home, and that was the end of his British career. So there's been issues in the past and there is issues now. So it's just sad in a way that we're a Commonwealth country and we've got to apply for a work permit. But they're the rules, I guess. That's what the British Home Office decide, and that's how it goes.
And the final question then, we've got this meeting with the perfect lineup for your team, the perfect location. Who is going to be the opposition? And this is any complete team from history.
Well, could I pick a World Team Cup team?
Go on then.
It's only 4 riders I know and a reserve, so it's 5. But I reckon the Australian World Team Cup team in 2001 and 2002, they were pretty shit hot.
And who was in that team?
In that team was, you're pushing me here, Crumpy, Todd Wiltshire, Ryan Sullivan, Jason Lyons and Lee Adams. Yeah, I would love to see that team against all the others. We might have to add a couple of other Aussie ring-ins maybe, I reckon. Maybe
you could join in.
Phil Crump and Billy Sanders would top the cake, I reckon.
Sounds like a fantastic lineup to me, and thanks for putting together your Speedway Paradise. And thanks for joining us, Shane, and giving up a bit of your evening. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. It's
been my pleasure. Thank you very much, and I hope I don't bore too many people with this podcast. Cheers.
I don't think so, because you're ever the entertainer.
No worries. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And what we haven't told people is that we've been sat here just in our boxes.
I like it.
My thanks to Shane Parker for joining us on this episode of Humans of Speedway. And don't forget, there's other episodes you can check out if you've not listened to them yet, including with Scott Nichols, Nigel Pearson, Jeff Scott, Neil Machin, and Peter Oakes. They're all available wherever you get your podcasts. Plus, we always like hearing from you. You can get in touch with us via our social media accounts at Speedway Humans on Twitter, or look out for us on Facebook. Just look out for Humans of Speedway on there. And you can give us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe so you get the next episode direct to your device. And until the next time, take care, and we'll see you soon on the next Humans of Speedway.
Social Podcast Network.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.